Chamber has truly focused on working to provide all the needed enabling, facilitating kind of structures and policies and just items that our nonprofits need to provide and continue to provide direct service, like the Ppe Distributing, or connecting companies that were creating or shipping and producing all the hand sanitizers and things like that, and making sure that first responders had access to the shots when they were available. Let's see. So just a little bit more about Michael, though. He was a healthcare associate at Bricker and Eckler and a policy associate or policy analyst at the Children's Defense Fund, so we have something in common here. And as regional voter protection director in the Northwest Ohio during the 2016 presidential election. Michael holds a BA from Duke University, a master's in education policy from The Ohio State University, and his law degree from the Moritz College of Law, where he served as executive editor of the Ohio State Law Journal. He lives in Columbus here with his wife Lori and their son Elijah, who is adorable, and also their rescue schnauzer Ruby. So, Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Tracy, for that very kind introduction. You'll forgive me, I'm going to keep this on. My mother-in-law tells me I look much better when I'm covered up, so I wish I were joking to you, but I'm not. So I'm a recovering lawyer, as Tracy said, so I can talk. I apologize for that, so I'm going to keep myself on the clock here and make sure I save time for questions. Hopefully I haven't bored you into sleep by then, so I'm going to jump right in. So as has been mentioned, our organization is essentially a chamber of commerce for health and human services nonprofits in Columbus. And I'll tell you out of the gate, there aren't many organizations like ours around the country, which is good in that we get to kind of make it up as we go along and meet the needs of what our organizations are telling us that they need. The challenge, of course, is we have to figure it out as we go along. We don't necessarily have a network to tap into to provide the support that we try to provide to organizations. But what we're going to try to do today is talk you through a number of things. Who we are, who we were, I should say, who we are, our team, what we do, challenges ahead, and then have time for questions from all of you. Okay, so who we were. We were created in 2010 when about 70 nonprofit leaders decided they wanted an entity that just focused on the nonprofits themselves. They used to be convened in our community by the United Way, actually. And for whatever reason, that stopped happening. And this group of nonprofit leaders said we need our own group that can engage with public officials locally on our behalf. So the chamber was born. And you can see our old logo and the launch of the chamber back in 2010 when a gentleman named Steve Votaw, if you know Steve Votaw, he just announced his retirement. I'm terribly depressed that he's no longer going to be one of my bosses. But he's been around for a long time, hence his founding of this organization 11 years ago and counting. The other thing that they tried to focus on out of the gate was trying to drive efficacy and collaboration and have efficiencies accordingly. And that largely just manifested in making sure that agencies were sharing with one another what they were doing and how they could share resources, pool resources to get things done. I came aboard in 2017. Our membership had actually shrunk to about 48 organizations. I'm the 5th director since 2010. There were 2 really strong ones, 2 that weren't so strong, and then they got stuck with me in 2017. To tell you who we are, to be eligible, you have to be a 501c3 providing services or supporting services in Franklin County. Our membership levels right before COVID began were about 80. And as Tracy said, we've somehow blossomed to 133 organizations. In terms of the kinds of organizations we serve, they are as diverse in their size as in the kind of work that they do. We have organizations that have a staff of 0 and are all volunteer run. And our largest member is National Church Residences, which is a $350 million nonprofit with reach across the country. So I'll tell you now that the challenge of our job is how do we provide value to these very, very different organizations that have very, very different needs. So we try to think of it as a buffet, and I'll jump into that in a second. we try to think of it as a buffet. Whether an organization wants one thing that we try to do or all of it, we want them to leave satisfied with what they've gotten out of what we're trying to provide. In terms of our team, we're currently a staff of 1.5 people. That's my colleague Cardella. She's part-time. She's our executive assistant, and I'm delighted to tell you in a couple of weeks we'll be adding our second full-time staffer. I just could not be more excited to have someone else to work with. Our board of directors there, we're kind of a unique nonprofit in that our board is comprised exclusively of, at this point, 11 of our member CEOs. Our current chair, the larger picture of all of them, is Rachel Lustig, who runs Catholic Social Services. She completes her tenure the end of December. Our next chair will be Christy Angel, YWCA Columbus, and we're filling out the rest of the board. We actually have had a lot of vacancies on our board over the last 18 months, as you might know. We're going through something called the Great Resignation, among other things, and our sector's leadership hasn't been immune from that. Of our 133 member organizations, 25 have had turnover or are about to have turnover at the CEO or executive director level in that short amount of time. That's kind of extraordinary. Of all of them, only one was a nonprofit CEO before. That's extraordinary too. That's an opportunity and a challenge for us, but I'll get to that later. The rest of our team, obviously our members are very important to everything that we do. They're telling us what they need, therefore we do it. When one organization needs something, we can go to the rest of our membership and say, this organization needs something, can you help them? For example, on real estate. That is always a big issue for a lot of our organizations. An organization is looking to move into a particular neighborhood and provide services. They don't necessarily have bottomless pockets to pay for the rent, so we can send out a missive to the membership and say who can accommodate a nonprofit and 2 staff in your particular neighborhood, and folks can raise their hand and make that happen. We do stuff like that all of the time. And then lastly, the community is part of our team. I cannot tell you how invaluable the community has been to our membership and to the community, to the sector rather, over the last 19 months and counting. The key one, obviously, has been financial. This community has been more generous than most in supporting nonprofits. But in PPE alone, the amount of PPE that has been donated from businesses, from hospitals, from government, from individuals has just been extraordinary, and I'll get into some of those numbers in a little bit. Okay, what do? We try to provide a handful of targeted services to benefit the membership and to benefit the community at large. The key one, the fundamental one for us, will always be government relations. Before I came on board, it was exclusively local. Since then, it's been local, state, and federal. We'll work with anybody that we can reach at all levels of government, and not just elected officials, but folks that are on staff. Public health officials have obviously become a really key partner that we've been working with over the last 19 months and counting. That photo is from pre-COVID times. It was about 2 weeks before the shutdown began, where we hosted a roundtable with Senator Portman, where we were talking about an anti-evictions bill that he was promoting in the U.S. Senate. We're going to miss Senator Portman dearly when he retires the end of next year. The second piece are shared professional services and resources. This is something we didn't focus on too much pre-COVID, but we've really tried to focus on ever since, which is to say, we try to find the professional service, for example, legal, and then provide it to our membership at no extra cost. So we've hired Bricker & Eckler over the last 18 months or so. We ask them questions on behalf of individual members, and then we can share those answers to the full membership. They provide webinars, they provide analyses, they provide insights that we can pass along to our organizations, and that has just been enormously, enormously valuable. We're trying to build out a whole suite of services like that to benefit the sector. We're working on that, and the new staffer that I'm bringing on board next month, that will be that person's primary charge. How do we make that as robust as we possibly can make it? In terms of shared resources, are any of you familiar with Google Spreadsheets? We use Google Spreadsheets all the time. For example, every month we ask our members to tell us how they're navigating mask policies, vaccine policies, and workforce challenges. And they put it all into a shared spreadsheet so they can see how they're all navigating things, and that helps all of them make hopefully better and better decisions month to month. Information is the third area where we try to provide a service. And I'm sure Tracy can tell you, they're sick of me. I email our folks once a day with insights, updates, analyses, predictions, resources, funding opportunities, you name it. I try to jam it into these daily communications, write them as succinctly as a lawyer can, and make it possible for our folks to just have that information to help them be the strongest decision makers they can be in running their respective organizations. It's a lot of work asking them to read a long email every day, but we try to make that a valuable, concise tool for them as they navigate their respective teams. Next, we convene. Last year, we brought our membership together every Friday morning via Google Meet, which is like Zoom, and allowed them to talk, commiserate, complain, be sad, be happy together, brought in a lot of guest speakers. This year, we've been meeting either every other week or monthly, trying to give our folks a little bit of a break as things have died down a little bit. Our last meeting was on Friday, and we spent 30 minutes in a very spirited discussion talking about the challenges of retaining new staff and the challenges of recruiting new staff. It's not unique to the sector, but some of the unique picadillos of that are unique to the sector. And having, I think we had 60 folks on that meeting, trading ideas, trading best practices, and trading things that, quite frankly, don't work at all, is enormously valuable. And all I have to do is click, you're here, and then let them talk. I have a very easy job. I just get to bring them together. Community education advocacy is the next thing we try to provide to our members. What does that really mean? So during COVID, it's been really important to help amplify certain things to and through our member organizations. So for example, you can see in this photo, we have a lot of our nonprofit CEOs with masks on, where we've been trying to promote mask wearing. Obviously, that's a little bit less critical than it was previously to prior to vaccines, but trying to do anything and everything we can to give them materials that they can then disseminate to their networks. So instead of reaching a handful of people like we would only be able to do by ourselves, our agencies can reach hundreds of thousands of people through their social media, through their net newsletters, through their events, and so on and so forth. And trying to equip them with things that can be valuable for all of them has been a key cog in what we're trying to do. We're also trying to help them get people vaccinated. And what tools can we give our agencies to help vaccinate people? That's been a key element of what we're trying to do as well. Next is promotion of jobs, board service, and events. If you go to our website, you can see we have the community's only nonprofit jobs website, Jorbs, goodness gracious. So any nonprofit that's a member of ours can post their employment opportunities on our website. That is, as you'd imagine, our most visited webpage. Second, board service. Anyone in the community that wants to apply to serve on a nonprofit board can fill out a brief application on our website. It goes into a shared Google spreadsheet, and then I share that with our CEOs, and as they have openings on their board, they can reach out to anyone that has applied. That becomes particularly valuable during this time of year as board tenures end and new ones are set to begin. And we also have a community calendar where all of our agencies can share their events, whether programmatic, fundraising, galas, events, you name it, they can put it all there. A few other things. Tracy mentioned our Ppe Distribution. This is what we've routed over the course of 19 months. And these are all through donations from all sorts of sectors. About 750,000 masks have routed through us to our members and then into the community. 100,000, it actually should be 200,000 plastic gloves. That was all from Kimball Midwest. They found out we had a need, there was a shortage. I've learned more about the logistics of glove manufacturing distribution. Did you know that 80% of them are manufactured in Malaysia? And because of COVID shutting down Malaysia for a spell, the whole world got behind on plastic gloves. So Kimball Midwest said, we've got some. And they weren't quite medical grade, but they were good enough. And that has been enormous help. As an aside, there's now a company in Columbus that's manufacturing plastic gloves. They're building their facility now to get that done. So that's an interesting element of all of the shifts that are happening. All sorts of other soap and sanitizer and everything else. It's been a little bit less of a job for us over the last couple of months because local partners have been really generous. The Emergency Management Authority has a huge warehouse on the west side filled with PPE, and they've made that available to our members at no cost for the last several months. So I'm doing a lot less logistics, which is better for everybody these days. Obviously, we talked about vaccinations. About a month ago, 56 members of our membership announced they were committing to having a fully vaccinated staff. That was written broadly on purpose because not everyone wanted or needed a mandate for their respective organization. For some of them, it wasn't necessary. There was 100% voluntary uptake within the staff. And for others, they were like 2 people off, and they were working individually with individuals to figure out how they could get folks to get vaccinated and be safe as they were doing so. And then holiday drives. So I wanted to mention this. You were talking out of the gate about some of the do-gooding that you're doing. We've created a page on our website where we've got this graphic and a big Google spreadsheet that lists all of the holiday drives and events that our members are putting on between now and the end of the year. That's the kind of work we're trying to do to amplify what our agencies are up to. Okay, that was a lot. How much time do I have? I got a little bit left. Challenges ahead. So in June and July, when cases were very low, we all kind of caught our collective breath in the nonprofit sector. And the question was being posed by our government officials here of, okay, what does the community need that the nonprofits are providing? Where are we at? Where are we going with all of this? And our answer at the time was, well, we're not sure if we're in the eye of the hurricane or on the edge of it. And the hope is that we were on the edge of it and everything was going to be behind us. And obviously that was incorrect. We were in the eye of the storm. And now I think we're on the edge of the storm. We have 2 more difficult months ahead of us. And then I think from everything we've learned, because I don't know anything, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist, but from everything I've learned, we're 2 months away or so from this last wave, this 5th wave that's begun to be behind us. The treatments will be there, the immunity levels will be sufficiently high, and so on and so forth. So I think that is number 1, is COVID wave 5, and how we navigate that, how long will that take, how disruptive will that be over the next couple of months. The second, I should say, we're not sure on a lot of fronts where we're at. So we're kind of in this purgatory, for lack of a sort of negative word. I don't mean that to sound negative. But there are things we don't know that we can't control that we know are coming. Obviously, COVID is the key one. The second is American Rescue Plan funding. The city and the county and the state are sitting on collectively over $1 billion of American Rescue Plan funds that they're yet to allocate. How those get allocated to nonprofits and to the community will have a significant effect on the sector and its needs and the needs of the people in Columbus and Franklin County. The third uncertainty is what new federal policy and regulation will be coming that's relevant to the sector. Obviously, the infrastructure bill was very much appreciated by our sector for the most part, even though it doesn't do anything immediately or directly relevant to the sector. It's going to help a lot in a lot of different fronts. Some of the legislation, the one piece of legislation that's sort of caught up right now, would have an effect. Some of our members feel really good about it, some of them don't. We'll kind of see how all of that goes. But what else will come out in terms of regulations primarily over the next 12 months at the federal level, and what the state does, all of that is terribly relevant, and we don't have answers. We have to be ready for whatever may come on those fronts. And then the last short-term uncertainty is the economic recovery and the workforce challenges that we're seeing. The better the economy is doing, the lesser the needs are on our sector. And the recovery has kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit because of some of the other issues that are out there, but we're waiting to see how that stabilizes. In terms of the medium and long term, there's a question of what government funding and support will look like a year from now, 5 years from now. We know that federal supports are enormous and will remain so for the next 3 years or so because that's how long those streams are set to apply. But what happens next? What will the state approach to health and human services be? The state budget fight we had this past summer was, I think, a harbinger of what's to come. We have to be ready for whatever may come there. Continued workforce challenges will continue to be enormous, obviously. And one that you wouldn't necessarily expect is something we're trying to brace for too, and that's climate change. So for example, Life Care Alliance. Are you familiar with Life Care Alliance? They do Meals on Wheels, among other things. They distribute fans every summer to senior citizens that don't necessarily have access to air conditioning. That need has grown and grown over the last 5 years. That's an example of how climate change is affecting us already, even though it doesn't feel like the big scary stuff we see in other parts of the world or even the country. How is our community going to brace for that? Because the consequences of it are disproportionately borne by the people that our agencies serve and the agencies themselves. So we're talking with partners across the Columbus Partnership to public health about how we can brace for and prepare against some of the consequences therein. Everything from, can you institute a recycling program at your organization, all the way up to installing solar panels on your respective roofs. And with all of this, I can't tell you how supportive the Columbus Partnership has been, which surprises people. But they have been wonderful advocates and allies on this and many other issues over the last 19 months, and I'm sure will continue to be in the months and years ahead. So that's a very, very quick overview of what we do, what our agencies are navigating right now, and I would love to welcome any questions that you might have. Go ahead, please.
2 questions. What's your due structure? How is that configured? And number 2, do you do studies like salary comparisons?
Great questions. So our business model is pretty simple. We tier the dues amounts based upon the agency's revenue from the prior year. Typically, we would move that back every year, but we've been basing everything on 2019 figures since there's been such turmoil the last 2 years in terms of finances for folks. But it maxes out at $5,000 per year for agencies that have $10 million in revenue or above. And the lowest rung is $500 per year for the smallest organizations. In terms of studies like that, we don't do the studies ourselves, but we will often work with partners to get studies done to benefit the sector. And on compensation, for example, it's funny you mention that because that's a hot topic right now as folks are making their budgets or finalizing them. And while there is no nonprofit compensation report locally, there is one from a national organization called GuideStar. And we just spent money purchasing those to distribute to our agencies, I think 2 weeks ago. So at least got those national figures. That's a hot topic for lots of reasons, one of them being the bigger nonprofits have been bringing their salaries up and adding to their benefit packages to be more competitive, whereas some of the medium-sized and small nonprofits aren't necessarily in a position to do that. So they're all trying to figure out what adjustments that they can make in the year ahead. Thank you for those questions. Please.
You didn't mention that you're doing fundraising yet for your members, or are you? And what would United, is that a conflict with United Way for you to do that?
Right, so we don't do any fundraising per se, certainly not for us. I never ask for money for me. The fundraising that I do is I ask our elected officials, our philanthropic organizations, the business community to support our agencies financially. And that can really run the gamut. So we don't conflict with United Way at all. Their focus is obviously on the corporate side. So we work together, whether intentionally or not, to ask the corporate community for financial support for the sector. Mm-hmm. Please.
As a follow-up, are you involved with the big give at the Columbus Foundation?
Great question. Only so much as that we amplify it and encourage participation in that, but we don't have any engagement in the day-to-day with the Columbus Foundation on that particular issue. Yeah, but we're always grateful when it happens.
Where do you want your organization to be in 3 years?
I'd like us to have a relationship with every big city in the country, which is to say, I don't want to be centralized where we're running things. I want to be connected to the similar organizations in every big city in the country so that we can do a heck of a lot more than we're able to do right now. Because there aren't many organizations like ours, we don't have that network to tap into where we can push together on any of the things that we've discussed. Having that would be tremendously advantageous. There are statewide organizations like ours across the country. Oano is the one in the state of Ohio. But there's something unique about having that hyper-local focus. It's more, you know the people differently than you do if you're at a statewide level. So that's the first thing I would say, where I'd like to be in 3 years. I'd like to have that national presence. Please.
Why do you think you are so unique? Why has this not occurred in other big cities?
So I think the general answer is that there has been a de facto organization like ours that's tried to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish in most cities, usually through some of the bigger, more established agencies, where a handful of people that are well regarded and are willing to do this sort of collaborative work have made things happen on behalf of the sector. That's a nice way of saying the United Ways, the community foundations, some of the Ys have done that in other communities. It's also kind of hard and not necessarily efficient to have ask all these nonprofit CEOs to also do this other thing on the side to benefit all of the nonprofits. So I think that's the reason why, but I honestly haven't asked. That's one of the things that's on my very long to-do list, to get a sense of what would stop other cities from having something like this. And honestly, it might just be because it exists at the statewide level in every state. So why have it in the respective big cities or small cities or in between? That's my hunch. Thanks for that question. Please.
You mentioned that you don't accept contributions. What are your sources of revenue? Is that from your members? And
Yes.
You may have mentioned whether you're a profit or nonprofit. I may have missed it.
I didn't. Thank you for that. We're a nonprofit as well. We're a C4. There's no reason anymore for us to be either a C4 or C3. The primary reason that was created out of the gate for the Chamber in 2010 was that they thought we would do a heck of a lot of lobbying because you need that flexibility. And we don't lobby that much. We engage with our elected officials regularly, but it's mostly sharing information and having conversations and connecting them to our members, as opposed to saying, please do this, please don't do that, although we do plenty of that too. So we're a C4. In terms of our revenue, the vast majority of our dollars are dues-based. So our agencies pay dues, and that, we get some grants every now and again from nonprofits. We used to get government funding from the city of Columbus, and we haven't, we see an annual grant from the city. We got some emergency funds last year to provide shared services to our members, but that's neither here nor there. It's mostly dues. Mm-hmm. Last question.
Just a number. How many nonprofits are there in Central Ohio who are not members of your organization but should be?
So,
Just a number.
yeah, I wish I could give you, it's not quite that simple, unfortunately. So there are 8,000 nonprofits in Franklin County, technically. But that's misleading because that includes religious organizations, it includes charter schools, it includes medical facilities like hospitals and so forth that wouldn't be relevant to the work that we're doing. It's very, very difficult to get a precise number of how many health and human services or supporting nonprofits there are in any particular community or even across the country. All of that said, my guess is that there's probably 20 to 25 more organizations that would make sense to fit within the membership of our organization. And one of the things we're going to try and do next year, the 1,000,001 things we want to do next year, is create some new membership tracks. So it's not just health and human services agencies. If an individual wanted to benefit, for example, or an organization like CODA or the library or Rotary or whomever else wanted to join, but we have to figure out what the value proposition for them will be still. So I've got work to do there too, Rick. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and what you do.
Thank you, Michael. That's it. Have a really wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you guys next week.